and then I'll share my screen. Okay, so as the title of this program suggests, we are going to be talking about forest stewardship plans today. And we're really just going to be going through some of the basics about what is a forest stewardship plan and, what is in a forest stewardship plan and why you all might want to get one. So first, just starting out, a forest stewardship plan is a written document that establishes a landowner's intention for forested property and provides management guidelines for achieving those goals. So essentially, it is a roadmap that helps you plan for what you want to try to accomplish on your land over the next, could be 5 years, could be 20 years. But there are some basic things that should be included in your plan. So you want to have a description of what the landowner's objectives are for their property. This is really important. A forest stewardship plan really should include, what you are trying to accomplish on your land. And so that is in the plan. It's also going to include what is some of the resources that are on your land and what condition they are currently in. So, what's there, how is it doing, what needs to be done with it. And then I think, most important part of a plan is that it also gives you the steps to achieve that. And so basically a plan will help you walk you through what different management activities you have to do and when in order to achieve your goals. Oops, I'm going backwards. Okay, so why would you maybe want to get a forest stewardship plan? The first reason is, as I said, it helps you reach your goals. You might understand and you might know that, for example, you want to remove invasive species on there, and that might be one of your priorities, but this will help you actually reach that goal. Um, Another reason that you might want to get a plan is that in order to be eligible for cost sharing programs with the state or the federal government, you need to have a forest stewardship plan. So basically, if you have a project that you're trying to do on your property, if you have a forest stewardship plan and if it fits with what you're trying to do, you can apply to different organizations and then you can get funding to help pay for some of those management activities that you're trying to do. So that's another reason to get a forest stewardship plan. So a third reason, a lot of times properties are, a big part of a family. It's an area where family comes together. It's an area that, people want to pass down to future generations. And so a forest stewardship plan can be a good way for you to communicate with your family. What are you trying to do on your land? What are you trying to accomplish? And what direction are you trying to take it? Um, and then lastly, a forest stewardship plan helps you be a better steward for your forest. It's something that you can share with natural resource professionals. It's something that you can share with loggers. And in general, it just helps you improve the forest health of your property. Okay, so we are specifically talking about forest stewardship plans, but I just wanted to highlight that there are different types of forest management plans out there. And so, depending on what you're trying to do, and depending on what your priorities are, different plans might be better for different things. So another common plan that you maybe have heard about is an MFL plan. And basically an MFL plan is a plan that is required if you want to be a part of the Managed Forest Law program, which is a landowner incentive program that encourages sustainable forestry on private land. And so, um, that is a different type of plan that you can get if you want to join that program. There are some benefits and there are some drawbacks depending on, what your goals are and what you're interested in, between those two different plans. But in general, if you join the MFL program and get an MFL plan, you can get a reduction in your property tax as a part of being part of that program. That is not true with forest stewardship plans. Forest stewardship plans are more about you and what you are trying to accomplish on your property, and are more based on, you're the one that has to make sure this stuff happens. And so that is kind of goes into the next point of when you get an MFL plan, you are required to do the activities that are in the plan. So, uh, during the year that you maybe have to do a harvest, you'll get a notification from the DNR saying, hey, you have a harvest year coming up. So that's a little different. With a forest stewardship plan, that is with where you work with your forester to make sure you're staying on top of what you're trying to accomplish in your plan. But there's not, with a forest stewardship plan, there's not that same requirement to do things in a certain period. And the MFL plan does have some more parts to it that are not necessarily in a forest stewardship plan. So, yeah. There are other types of plans out there as well. This is just an example of a couple of more popular ones. Okay, so the plans that I'm going to be talking about today, again, are a forest stewardship plan. And the ones that I'm going to be highlighting are the ones that you would get using the DNR template. And so that's going to be the ones that we are going to be looking at today. But different foresters that you might work with have different ways of doing a forest stewardship plan, and maybe they might look a little bit different than the one that I'm showing you today. But they should have a lot of the same components, or all the same components that we're talking about. They might just look different. So as I said, your goals are an incredibly important part of your plan. And so that is why, in the plan that we're talking about, this is pretty early on in the plan, that you will outline in there, what are you trying to accomplish? So whether that's, hunting, like someone said, or firewood, or you want it to be open for recreation for you on the land, whatever those goals are going to be, those are going to be outlined in this plan. Now, this plan also has to consider what is actually there and what is actually possible on your plan. So it's going to be kind of a balance between, your goals, but also what can be accomplished on the property that you have. So, another part of the plan is going to be looking at is going to be a description of the different areas or the different stands on your property. And so just so we're all on the same page, a stand is an area of your woodlands that has similar species, similar age classes, similar characteristics that kind of make it a particular unit on your property. So that's what a stand is. And so in your forest stewardship plan, it's going to have a description of each of those stands that are on your property. And so I have an example here of just one. There are many, many out there. And so this is just an example of one that can be found in a plan. But if you have a northern hardwood on your a northern hardwood stand on your property, this is what a description might look like. And so you can see that it kind of it talks about the different species that are commonly found in a northern hardwood species, or in a northern hardwood forest. So, it consists of 50% of a combination of sugar maple, basswood, white ash, yellow, birch, and beech. And it also kind of talks about some of the typical characteristics, or, typical um, uh, how they come together in the forest. Um, and then also it does talk about soil and what kind of soil is commonly found with that type of forest. And that can be important because, you know, depending on what kind of soil you have or depending on the condition of your soil, that will impact, you know, what you can grow in your woodlands. And so this is just kind of an example. I'm also just going to say that I will be sending out an example plan at the end. So if you don't have a chance to read through all of this on the slides, that's totally okay. I will send that out to you later. Okay, so some other parts of your plan. So as I said, that each stand, your plan will describe each of the stands that you have in your woodlands. And then for each of the stands, you are going to have these things that are on the slide that will be described in your plan. And so basically, in your stand, you are going to have sort of just general stand information. So what species do you have there? How old are they? What is the soil type? You know, maybe are there invasive species present? That's going to be sort of your general stand information. Then underneath that, you're also going to have, okay, what kind of condition is this currently in? Or what, you know, what special features are there or what characteristics are there? So, you know, maybe your stand is in really great condition or maybe it's not in as good of condition. That would be described there. Maybe the forester that writes this for you will say, okay, this would be really great habitat for um, you know, for songbirds. That might be highlighted here in this plan, or, you know, they found invasive species present. That would maybe be highlighted there. And so it just kind of gives you not only, you know, what is actually there, but how is all the things that are there doing right now. And then for each stand, you are also going to get information about, okay, what is your goal? What is your overall goal for that stand? What are you aiming for? And so then that's going to be under your management or silvicultural system part of your plan. And then at the end, for each stand, you're going to get an outline of what are you trying to accomplish and when are you trying to accomplish it, and the different management activities that you have to do and kind of when to reach that sort of general management system goal. So before we move forward, I'm going to be giving some examples and I'm going to be talking about some different management activities that you might come across so that you can start thinking about them. But I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page about a few definitions. So I'm just going to go through these really quickly. So an even age stand is a stand of trees that are pretty close, are pretty much the same age. You know, the more formal definition is that the difference in age between the youngest and the oldest tree does not exceed 20% of the total rotation age. But just generally, that means that the trees are about the same age. An uneven age stand means that there are at least 3 distinct age classes. So there are at least 3 different groups of trees, or, you know, trees that are in different ages in it. And so, you know, an uneven age stand is going to have something that has more, you know, older trees and potentially younger trees. Whereas an even age stand is going to have pretty much trees about the same age, about the same size, looking very similar. Obviously, it depends on your woodland, but those are kind of the general definitions. Another thing we're going to be talking about is shade tolerant species and shade intolerant species. Depending on what kind of species you're trying to have on your land, you are going to do different management activities depending on if they are shade tolerant or shade intolerant species. So a shade tolerant species is one that will grow in a shady environment. That basically means that, if there's an overstory that is really closed up and the forest floor is really, really shady, then um, species that are shade tolerant will still be able to grow. Um, Species that are shade intolerant are the opposite. They're the ones that need sunlight. And especially when they're young, they need that sunlight and access to it in order to grow. And so a lot of management techniques will focus on opening up areas to get more sunlight and to get more access to those young trees that need sunlight. So again, we'll talk more about shade tolerant and shade intolerant species. So just going back to these definitions or these things that we talked about that are the different parts that you'll get for each of your stand, I'm now going to go through and kind of give you an example. So this is that first part that just kind of describes what's there. And so this is just an example so that you can kind of see what it is. Yours might look different than this, but this kind of lets you start thinking about it. And so you can see that the forester that wrote this plan just identifies that white oak, red oak, and basswood are the most prominent species there. They're the ones that they're seeing the most. They also identified that most of the trees are about the same age. So they originated about 1900. And then they also talk about the soil as well. And then they talk about the fact that they did find some invasive species there, that Japanese barberry and multiflora rose. Okay, so then the next part, this is actually the next two parts. And again, I'll send this out. So if you don't have a chance to read all of this, that's okay. But it just generally kind of talks about the condition of that stand. And so it has a lot of over mature white oak, so older trees. And then the red maple is younger, but it's not in great quality. Um, it's it uh, yeah, it's not in great quality, but there is still a decent amount of maple in the understory, so it means that they're getting a lot of maple regeneration or young maple trees coming back up. The landowner, this also highlights that the landowner has been doing some work to try to control some of the invasive species, because this is something that, based on this plan, when you look at it, does seem to be something that the landowner is concerned about. And they do highlight that it has some great wildlife habitat on it as well. So then the next part, as I said, is just sort of that general goal for that stand. And so for that stand, they are trying to create more uneven regeneration. So as we saw from earlier, most of these trees are about the same age. And so they are trying to create in this stand more uneven age classes. So more trees of different ages moving forward. And so that's kind of the general goal for this stand. And so the next part, is going to be, this is an example of what this landowner needs to do to try to reach that goal. And so they talk about in 2019 having a release. So basically they are trying to remove some of the competition between trees that will, if you remove some of the trees that are there, that'll give the trees that stay there more access to light and more access to resources that they need. And so that's step one for this particular stand. And then step two is that they want to do a patch selection harvest. So again, this will depend on your plan, but they are basically going to be cutting patches or small areas in the forest, um, and then um, opening that up so that other trees can regenerate and grow in. And by doing that in different spots and potentially at different times, they are then able to create those trees of different ages, because basically they're cutting down trees in a small patch, and then that lets new ages of trees come in and gets a little bit more diversity. Um, and then also they have some invasive species control that they can do to try to stop the spread or the continual growth of invasive species. So yeah, this is an example, but depending on what the ultimate goal is for the stand, this might have more steps or fewer steps, or say that you should repeat it a couple of different years. It just kind of depends on what the forester suggests you should do. So, I just want you to start to get you to think about some of the management activities you might come across in your plan. Um, this is not a complete list of things that might get recommended. Um, so, you know, once you get a plan, you should definitely continue to work with your forester, and you should definitely ask them questions as you're going along. But this is just some examples so that you can start thinking about some of the things, some management activities you might come across. So it's possible that they might suggest a clear cut harvesting where you're basically removing everything, um, removing all the trees. They might suggest a selective or some kind of partial harvesting. I'll give a couple of examples of that and show some pictures so you can see what that looks like. They might also potentially suggest a prescribed burn. This is a great way to to clear the understory and prepare the site for replanting, or if you have some natural regeneration, so some trees that are already there that you're trying to get to come back. Sometimes fire is a good management technique. Um, you also might want to do some planting. If there's certain species that you're trying to bring back to an area, that there's not a great seed stock in that area, then you might need to do some planting. Or if you have some concerns about tree disease or other things that might mean that you want to try to improve the genetic stock, so improve the trees that are there, then you might want to do some planting as well. They might also recommend some management activities like thinning, that just kind of open up an area a little bit and reduce the competition, or invasive species removal, which might mean something like cutting invasive species, potentially means chemical treatment of invasive species. These are some of the activities that you might do to reach your goals. And so I have a few more examples so that you can kind of see what this looks like a little bit more. So one example that I talked about was clear cutting. This is basically where you remove the trees and you remove what's in the understory to try to open that environment back up. And so this is a great way if you have, an older forest that you just need to reset, or if you're trying to get some of those species that are shade intolerant, so they need a lot of sunlight to come back, this might be something that you recommend. There's a lot of other reasons why they might recommend a clear cutting. Those are just some examples. But the one thing I will say is after you do a clear cutting, you just want to make sure you have a plan for what is going to come back in. Because if you're opening that back up without having, confidence that there's some good seeds in the ground or other things that can regenerate, or if plan on doing a planting, opening that up makes also great environment for invasive species. So you want to just make sure you have a plan so that you're not just making more invasive species. And so this is just an example and some pictures. This is what the area looks like before it was clear cut. And so you can see there's some things on the ground there already. This is what it looked like soon after the clear cut. So they removed, everything in this area. And then this is a few years after the clear cut. And so you can see that we have gotten some nice, in the pictures, there's been some nice pine regeneration. And that's, one of those species that does need sunlight and does need some openings in order to come back. So that's just one example. Another example that, for example, you might have is a shelter wood cutting. This ultimately kind of has the same result as a clear cutting, where you eventually do get rid of all of your trees in the canopy, but it is over time, and it takes multiple cuts in order to do it. So essentially, you remove some trees during your first cut. This opens the environment up. It lets new seedlings start to come in, but you are leaving some of those bigger trees to help continue to seed for regeneration, as well as to help protect some of those seedlings from wind and other things in that process. And then you go back in later and do a second cut and remove them. So you can kind of see what that looks like. So this is what it looks like. This is what the stand looked like in the beginning. Pretty dense, pretty dark on the forest floor. And then after the first cut, you can see that kind of opened it up. It's a lot lighter. They did remove some of the larger trees. They did remove some of the larger trees. And then this is 5 years after the first cut. So you can kind of see that understory is starting to grow back again. And then this is ultimately what it looks like when you do the final overstory cut. And basically at this step, you're trying to really open it up back up for those shade intolerant species and give them access to that full sunlight and resources. Another example that I have is thinning. This might be removing specific trees. This might be removing branches from trees. But, on this picture on the left, you can see that it's pretty thick. And there's not a lot of space between these trees. But then after you do a thinning on the right, it opens it up, it's lighter. And some of these younger trees can come back in. So yeah, part of what I was trying to highlight in all of these different examples is that there are a lot of different types of harvests that you can do. Anywhere from, a clear cut that completely removes things, or a patch cut that, just removes certain spots, or, to thinning where you're just removing some of the individual trees. There's a variation between what you would maybe do as a management activity. And it really does depend on, okay, I have this goal, and you will talk to your forester about that. And then they will come up with these different steps. But I guess also the point I'm trying to make is you don't, as a landowner, you don't have to be the one to figure out, okay, should I do a thinning? Should I do, a clear cut? That's where you work with your forester, because they will be able to answer those questions, and they will be able to make that roadmap for you. Some other things that might be in your plan as well is if you have some endangered or threatened or special species on your property. This can mean that maybe you can't do things at certain times of years, or it can just mean that maybe you have to do management activities as a certain way to just be in compliance with trying to protect some of these things that might be special. But again, this is something that your forester will put in your plan and can help you navigate. They will also look up if there's any archaeological or historical resources that might be important on your property. They'll also talk to you about invasive species, if there are any on your land, and what you need to be thinking about. And then lastly, if you do have water quality, or if you do have a water body on your land, your forester can also think about management activities that might help increase the water quality on your property as well. So I did see a question in the chat. For those pictures, I'm actually not sure if that was planted or regeneration. I have seen areas that when you open them back up and you have good pine in the ground, you can get natural regeneration that way. I have also seen places where you do need to do planting to try to bring it back. So I'm not sure what it was for this particular situation, but I do think, it kind of depends on your area. It depends on what you have in the ground right now. Depending, and that'll impact how you move forward. Okay, so now I'm going to stop sharing my screen on this, and I'm going to show you quickly what a plan looks like. So you are going to see a bunch of black boxes. And part of that is just, this is an actual plan that was given to a landowner. And so we just want to keep, some of their personal information safe. So, but, just starting out, it talks about the contact information and just some general information about the plan. The period of the plan, they can be up to, 25 years, depending on what you're trying to do. And then they'll also talk about the acreage of your plan or of your property and woodlands. This is just some general information that comes in the plan that talks about the purpose. With these forest stewardship plans, we are trying to, use sound forestry practices that are sustainable for the future. And so that's part of what needs to be in this plan. And then also, like I said before, if you get this plan approved, an approved plan can also make you eligible for things like, funding with our programs with the NRCS or with VOLGAP with the DNR. Yep. And then, management updates, you are responsible for working with your forester to make sure that your plan stays up to date, or if something changes, you can update your plan as well. But like I said here, these are the landowner goals, and they talk about what this particular person is trying to accomplish on their property. They will highlight the different stands, what year they need to happen, what timber type they are, and then what management activities they have to do. So when I was showing you examples, we were talking about stand 1. So we have that release year, we have that patch selection harvest, and then we also have that invasive species control here. It goes through the different types of forest that are on this woodlands. And again, I know I'm scrolling fast, so I will send this out to everybody. And then, these are some of those special features that I talked about as well, that, if there are archaeological or historical resources on your plan or on your site. This particular site doesn't have any. And then this is where you get down to that particular stand information. So we were talking about stand 1, that was 8 acres. And it has that sort of general stand information in it. and then those different parts as well, and the time frame for when things should happen. But this property has more than one stand. So you can see that in your plan, you will get you'll get this for each of your stand. And then just some more general information and resources will come in your plan as well. So this is, what a plan looks like. This is some general information about your plan. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I will open it up for any questions that we might have. And if you're more comfortable typing it in the chat, that is totally fine as well.
I thought I saw in the goals for that landowner, it went by pretty fast, but something about carbon something or other, and I didn't quite catch it. Can you explain a little bit about what that goal would be?
Let me go back to that place quickly. So this was the goals.
Oh, maybe I didn't read it right. I just thought I saw something about carbon on there.
Yes.
Hold on. Go scroll back up. Just underneath that bullet there, it says there's a sentence that says increase carbon sequestration under the management practices.
Okay. I didn't make it up.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're concerned about, if you're potentially concerned about climate change, and you want to try to manage your property so that you are having trees that are going to be really good at taking carbon out of the atmosphere and storing it, that is sometimes a goal that landowners have.
Okay.
And different trees, are more effective at that than others.
Okay. Will we cover that at all in this series of classes, or is that something I should look into?
We're not in particular going to be covering that, but it's great to know that you're interested in that. That is also something, once you get a plan, you can talk to your forester about it, and we can send you some good publications as well.
Okay, thank you.
This is Tom. If our property includes forested acres and agricultural acreage, does a forestry plan deal with the agricultural acreage at all, or is that completely separate?
So the plan itself would deal with the forested land, but because that would be part of your goals potentially, that would be part of what's there, what it's butting up against, that would probably be considered in what you're trying to do and what you end up doing, but it would be focusing on the forested area.
Got it. Thank you.
It's a good question. Any other questions? Okay, well then we might wrap up a little bit early, but I just wanted to talk through next week. So we will be meeting again next week at the same time on Thursday at noon. And in that class, we're going to be talking about how to prepare for working with a forester, so that you can get a plan. And so we'll be looking at how to figure out what your parcel number is. We'll be looking at what your goals are, and then we'll kind of have a sort of mini homework assignment next week that starts looking at mapping your land and thinking about the different areas. And then also I just wanted to highlight in the chat, Matt, one of our local Wisconsin foresters, did put in that if your ag land has future goals of agroforestry or reforestation, your forest stewardship plan can, you can discuss that in the techniques. So thank you, Matt. And actually, I'll just say Matt is going to be the forester that will be speaking with us during our last session. So he's a great resource if you have any questions. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. It was really great to chat with you all and talk about a topic that I'm excited about. So I will see you all next week.